This video is sponsored by Alpha Draft, where you can play fantasy esports and win money if you're good on games like CSGO, Dota 2, League of Legends, Smite. There's a whole bunch of them there. Go to the link in the description box below if you want to play fantasy esports. Now then, in esports, it's very easy to look at it from the outside as just competitive games and just tournaments for the best players. That's often the way in the media it's presented, as though it's just a tournament that's gathering the best players. We're going to see who wins. They don't understand that there's a scene there, there's a history to it, there's a community. People who join into the scene are buying into this history and knowing who the champions before them are and understanding the context of where they are in the scene. And it becomes a huge narrative. It takes over people's lives. And so as a result, you don't just see how good someone is at a video game. You see through how they compete the whole scene from a whole year, a tournament circuit, losing here, beating this guy, but not getting past the semis at this point, playing with different teammates, developing over their career, their style gets refined, they go through slumps. You actually get to see who these people are. Essentially, there's a great quote that says something along the lines of, your character is your destiny. I think it was like a quote from like some like ancient, what would they be called? Just like the elders of somewhere in like North America or something, some ancient wise men. It's like your character is your destiny. The notion is like who you are, how you think about the world, how you've worked on yourself is actually going to be part of your results. Yes, your talent's going to be attenuating the results, and how hard you work will have something to do with it. But the people who tend to come second or never get over a certain hurdle, even when they have the talent, sometimes more than enough talent, overflowing talent to accomplish more or to be the best and can't do it, it tends to be something about them and them as a person and their character and their flaws and the weaknesses they haven't been able to overcome and mental blocks they have or things they deny or aspects about their team where they're really good and they're doing their all right, but they think this teammate's failing me, but they haven't learned how to integrate him into the system or make him feel comfortable so that he'll be able to play, contribute a little bit and not facilitate them being better, or vice versa. They might be the role player and they might think this really great player on their team's too toxic and he puts them down and they have to find a way to get through to him and forge relationships. And so what's interesting is one of the most fascinating topics in esports to me is this notion of the person who they could succeed. They have the talent, they have the ability, they have the drive, the desire, but something means they fail. Maybe one of those 3 or 4 things they don't have. Like, yeah, it's easy to see, like the most simple thing to appreciate in esports is the great player, the best player, the one who has incredible talent. You can just aesthetically see he's wonderful, incredible, plays with grace, skill, power, precision. You can see all that. That's even the layman can catch on to that. And he can appreciate why that's so brilliant because he can see in contrast to his opponent, he's doing it better than him, he's doing it more effectively, he's doing it more efficiently, he's just got more force, he's making that guy play to his game. That's easier to see. Although I still think, obviously, the more you know about the game, the more you'll appreciate that guy. But that's understood as a baseline that everyone to a degree is enjoying whoever's the best in that sense. And one of the things that's difficult to see is that when the great player succeeds in that way, it's not just that you have the great player who does it and he succeeds and he gets over all this stuff. And then there's the guy where he had the talent to be the great player, the success, he was in position, he maybe even beat that guy sometimes, but he never quite had as much success, never achieved to the level he could have, should have, didn't meet expectations, fell at certain moments over and over again where, look, he choked or something went wrong. It's easy to look at that guy and think, right, these are 2 different people. One's a born winner, one's a born loser, end of story. You're just not clutch, you haven't worked hard enough, or you got a bad attitude. What you might not realize is, first of all, a lot of those great players, some of the greatest players of all time, in fact, when I think through history, some of the greatest players of all time in every esport game actually themselves were the other guy at one point in time. They had some problem early in their career. They had some block. They had some area that was a weakness that they thought, if I'll just hope that doesn't happen and my strength works out. And they would get so far, but then always somehow that would come up, the weakness. Some enemy who could attack that, could exploit that. They might exploit it themselves in as much as they'd fall apart mentally or there'd be some block for them. Oftentimes, the process of overcoming that is what makes the greatest player ever. Because at that point, he's worked on all his weaknesses. He's honest with himself about what his problems are. He's started to develop them. He's pursuing his craft, honing the fundamentals of certain areas so there's not as much luck involved because he's making his game more consistent along with the skill. He's working on his teammates. He's working on his philosophy for how the game should be played and being reasonable but being confident at the same time. Working on all aspects, and then he becomes the best. Even though talent-wise, he might have had the same talent at the beginning when he was failing as the guy that becomes the greatest ever afterwards. The talent aspect might not change that much. You might not have to work on his skills that much. It might be everything else, and that might make him there. So one of the things I find really satisfying is once you've gotten past the great player and you've stopped just looking at him, the next obvious person, to me at least, is the guy who has the talent to do it and the potential, and he has all these tools, but he has this key flaw. He has this tragic quality to him. He has something that holds him back. He's the next guy that fascinates me because I see that he has the talent. I can see the gap and that he could bridge it in certain aspects. And when I see him fail and repeatedly fall in the chasm that is that gap and be unable to make that leap and to make it early but not make it late and to lose in finals and always lose to this one guy even though he should be able to beat him, that becomes really fascinating. What's holding him back? He himself doesn't know, obviously, so it becomes a mystery, it becomes a puzzle to pick apart. And when you see that guy fix it, when you see him start to develop and start to overcome some of his problems, maybe not even fully, just a bit, to the extent he has some success and then a lot of success and sometimes even does become the greatest player ever, that is one of the most satisfying, beautiful, just like aesthetically pleasing things you can even experience in esports. It's great to see when it's just the great player and he's just done it anyway, but there's something extra about this guy when you sort of you've followed him on the journey, you've seen the toil that he had, the troubles that he had. Now, one of the problems is, one of the things that makes it so satisfying is that ultimately, no matter who they met, no matter what happened to them in their lives, the only thing that changes the guy who fails and has those problems into the winner, to whatever degree, the greatest or just a winner or someone who's overcome the problems, or just someone who's more successful, what changes him into that is always himself. Those people can only help themselves. So that is part of what makes it so rewarding and satisfying to see, because it doesn't matter that they had to meet this person or that person. What matters is that they did get there, and that ultimately, no matter what help they were offered, they had to take it themselves. They had to accept their issues, they had to work on them, and it's their toil, it's their willingness, their courage, their daring to still keep going, the persistence, endurance that allows them to get to the point where they do succeed and they didn't just quit and they didn't just resign themselves to always being that guy. Now, when I say that, it's because you can't help people in life in general. That'll sound like a crazy statement, right? What do you mean you can't help people? Of course you can. What I mean by that is in the sense that oftentimes people characterize helping someone. So I'm not even talking just about esports people. Let's take it outside of esports for a second. We're not just talking about people who fail in games or choke. Let's talk about real life, big problems, major problems that individuals have. They're depressed. It's overwhelming them. They can't get happy in any sense. They're just nothing's meaningful in their life. They're in a downward spiral. Then you've got the guy where it's a drug addict, maybe for similar reasons. He's trying to feel some hole in himself, some pain, something about life that he can't face just through drug abuse, whatever it might be. Might not even be that he just does it for literal pain, but pain is in, he doesn't know what his task is in life, so he's a dilettante. He just wastes his time. He tries to disassociate himself, tries to achieve that unconsciousness because he doesn't know what to do with his life. Life to him is boring. That's a level of low-level, banal pain that can cause these people to be in this situation. And then people just who are in real pain, emotional pain, problems where psychiatric problems, these sorts of things. You can't help any of these people in the sense that you can't come in and say, I can see your problems here. They hear the issues. I know how to fix it. Do these things. Now it's fixed. All you can do is help in as much as you can provide support. You can listen to them. You can talk to them. You can offer them a perspective and you can offer them tools. You can say, right, you need this certain aspect here, activities. I could help you with that. Like I could offer a way to do that, but you're going to have to be the one who does it. You're going to have to accept that you want to do it. If the drive isn't there, even me offering it and me even taking it, it's like you can lead a horse to water. You can't make it drink, They have to be involved in some sense. So that's why it's satisfying as well, because sometimes when you meet this guy and you do offer him the support and you do offer him the tools, when he then takes them up himself and applies them to himself and he does 99% of the work and you just gave him the 1%, which is offering the scenario or pointing in the right direction, that's when it becomes beautiful to see. I mean, I'll give you some sporting examples before I go into esports examples so that you can kind of get a sense of how this happens even in sports, and it's a very key process. And you'll also notice the people I'm going to list are some of the greatest players ever, but they had points in their career when it was killing them. So, okay, let's start off in tennis. It's a game I love, 1v1 game, very consistent game, and over the last 15 or so years, it's been really consistent at the top. There was this period in time where, it was easy to see that Federer and Nadal were two of the greatest players ever, because for a period of time, there was some crazy period of time where out of 29 Grand Slams, and there's only 4 every year, they'd won something like 28 of the 29. That's how good they were. And they were making finals all the time. And Federer was in every semi-final for like 27 in a row or something ridiculous. So yes, Federer was winning all these Grand Slams. He was a god. He was absolutely unbelievable. Yes, it's easy to look at Nadal and go, right, the way he can beat Federer, he's the only solid counter to Federer. Then he always wins at the French. And now he develops his game and wins on other surfaces. These were the great winners where it's easy to get a sense for what's brilliant about them. But that's where, once I've experienced that, now where my interest next goes to is the guys just below them who are getting held back every time. So at the moment, the player that's most interesting in that sense is Andy Murray. He's a guy who, talent-wise, is close to these people. He's better than some people who in history have more Grand Slams than him in terms of talent, in terms of overall skill set, what he can do in the game, his versatility across all the surfaces. But at the moment, he hasn't won very much. He's only won 2 Grand Slams. He's been in like 8 finals or something. He's been in tons of semi-finals. He's been in loads of quarterfinals. He's won loads of smaller titles. He's beaten the same people who've routinely beaten him in finals. Like, he's lost tons of finals to... It's only to Federer and Djokovic he loses finals. He's lost tons to them, though. But if he plays them in ATP 1000 tournaments, beats them there, sometimes the next level down. If he plays them in smaller tournaments, he'll get wins over them. If he plays them at the Olympics or plays them in some other type of tournament, Davis Cup, he can beat these guys. So it's not talent, it's not ability, it's not skill set. Because, for example, against Federer, he has quite an interesting matchup where he can beat him at time to times, just Djokovic can, because he's a great returner. He can run around the ball. He can make Federer work, make Federer have to take really risky winners. Likewise, when he plays against Djokovic, that's actually one of the most even matchups in the game. They have very similar skill sets, and it's just beautiful seeing them construct these long points and see who can endure most. And they're both great fighters, and they really have great fitness as well. So he has all the parts, but why isn't he as successful as these guys with the 6 Grand Slams, the 8 Grand Slams, the 14 Grand Slams, the 17 Grand Slams? Why can't he get there? Now, I don't know all the reasons yet. I could go through some of them. Choking at times, seems to get down on himself a lot, seems to focus too much on the flaws in the game. Sometimes, unfortunately, in terms of injuries, he hasn't always been fully match fit in certain senses. Sometimes he's just playing a greater player and you have to keep with it, knowing that in a few years they're going to fall off of it and now you'll be in position to win. There's all these reasons. But here's the interesting thing. I can take you back one player before to a player who was in the same position Murray is in and who overcame it and is now the best player in the world for the last, let me think, like 3 or 4 years at least, which is Djokovic. He is the best player in the world. He's, at the moment, the best on every surface to a degree. Yeah, probably the best on every surface. He's won every Grand Slam except the French Open. He's won tons of Grand Slams. He's had insane success of making finals, making semi-finals. He's an absolutely phenomenal, wonderful player. And when you watch him now, it's easy to see he's one of the greatest ever. And it feels now like he's always going to be. And he's going to win more Grand Slams. He's going to go even higher in the record books and even further in the annals of tennis history. But once upon a time, he was stuck in Murray's position. Back years ago when he was like 23, 24... Around this time, he was the guy who was making these deep runs in the semis. And then he'd make it into a final, but Federer would beat him there convincingly. And then he actually won a Grand Slam. Oh my God, he won the Australian Open 2008. But then after that, didn't matter. Back to getting beaten in semi-finals. Back to getting beaten in quarter-finals. Back to losing in a final to someone. Winning smaller events, feeling like I'm in position, I can beat these guys, but it just never happens for him. And what were the problems that he had then? It wasn't about talent, it wasn't about skill. Skill and talent, yes, he's developed these things. You do as you're a player, you work on it. But a lot of he had insane raw talent, same as Murray does now. He had insane ability and natural ability and developed it and had got a very good skill set. But what were some of his problems? He gave up. He was a guy who mental fortitude was quite poor. He would get broken. When he did get broken up mentally, then if his body was going at all, if he had a niggling injury at all, if he had any sort of pain, it would get to him. He'd retire from matches. The amount of matches he retired from is unreal. Meanwhile, another guy who had a lot of injury problems, Nadal, very rarely retires from matches. So part of this was mental. He was a guy where his talent led him to have a certain kind of arrogance, where he wanted too much too soon. He felt like he should win this guy. And so then he'd get raged at himself when he wasn't beating this guy, whereas he didn't understand, I'm still developing things. I might have more talent than that guy, but his game might be better refined. He might have the tools to beat me right now, and I have to be more patient and learn what he's doing, because he's sort of giving me hints as to how to beat him. Now what's interesting is all these flaws he worked on to a degree that they're now strengths of his, and that's why he's like near unbeatable in tennis right now. Because even his weaknesses are strengths, added to his strengths already, that gives you the complete package. So before he used to give up, he had problems with his fitness, problems with mental fortitude. Now he's the most fit player on the tour, and it ain't even close. This guy can run for miles. He could play a 5-hour match, then another 5-hour match, and at the end, he'll still be returning shots. Incredible athletic ability, built up from like endurance, cardio, from working and never giving up on that aspect. And because he's built up his body and he's started to work on his mind, he doesn't mentally give up. He's the best fighter in the game. He can be down in points. He can be down in sets. He can still come back. He cannot be serving well. The other guy can be on fire. He doesn't give up. He keeps plugging away. He knows that if he keeps working, puts himself in positions, he can succeed. His arrogance before, where it held him back before, now he's one of the most likable guys on the whole tour. Now everyone considers him a great ambassador. He's really funny. He seems to have a very level-headed perspective of himself, even though he's the best at the moment by far, and overall has all these advantages over other players. He has a very level-headed, because he understands it's not even about those other guys now. Now I'm battling myself to see what I can become and to keep my level head and to battle this guy. And this guy might be worse than me. I have less talent, might not be able to play as long, but if he gets the right thing going for him, he's going to beat me. So I have to approach this as though it's not about who's better. It's about how am I going to win this game. And now he's one of the best ever. Likewise, in this principle of great players take a weakness and make it their strength by accepting it's a weakness, working on it, learning about it, and developing it along with their strengths. So Michael Jordan is pretty much, I'll say universally, but it's not actually. If you know a lot of basketball heads, there's debate there. But in the general consensus of the public, he's universally hailed as the best basketball player to ever play. Absolutely phenomenal player. Some of the best fundamentals of all time. Amazing skill level. Incredible clutch gene to be able to hit the buzzer beat shots, to make those plays when you're down by 4 and there's like 2 minutes left. Incredible free throws under pressure. Amazing at doing whatever the team needs. Quite a good rebounding guard, actually, compared to some of the people. Always good assist numbers. This is a guy where you'd watch him and you're like, he must always have just been destined to be the best ever, right? That's what people say who didn't see the early part of Michael Jordan's career. The first 2 or 3 years of Michael Jordan's career, he was a slasher/dunker. He used to just be the guy who got into traffic, got as close to the basket as he could, used his athletic ability to aerobatically move around people, to hit crazy circus shots, and to get these shots and to get easier points. And that's how he was a huge scorer and a massive defensive nightmare. He was so fast, so skilled, big hands so he can control the ball a lot, has a lot of versatility where he goes, aggressive, but his skill set was very defined in that sense. Now, that's Michael Jordan. That guy never won any championships. Yes, he didn't have the teammates and these things had to develop alongside him. But actually, even if he'd had all those things, it's not necessarily the case that he would have necessarily won the championships. The guy who won the first 3 championships he won, 1991 to 93, this was where he had that. Now he developed a bit more to be more of a passer, to pass at the right times, to set other guys up, to slash in, draw the defense into him and kick it out to an open shooter who's a good shooter and he puts in a 3-point shot to work with the team in that sense. Worked on his defensive game a lot, so he became very good defensively, not just using his speed to gamble, but knowing how to keep people off, use his big hands to keep people in position in front of him. Worked on that a lot. And that's just his first 3. Like, in terms of athletic peak, that was his best period, the first 3 championships. But the masterpiece of Michael Jordan's career was the last 3 championships, 96 to 98. Because for these 3 championships, he wasn't a slasher/dunker. He wasn't a guy who was the fastest, the strongest, could throw anything in. I mean, he's never the strongest, but you know what I mean, for a guard, shooting guard. Instead, all these things were gone because now he was like 35 or something ridiculous. He was like 35, 36 at this time. At the point where for most people, they're going downhill, their body's giving out. Now they're just hoping to be relevant. He was the best player still. And the reason was he took his one weakness when he was another player, which was raw outside shooting. So he was never a good long 2-point shooter when he was in the really early days. He started to develop throughout his career, but by the time he got to the last 3 championships, he was the best 2-point shooter, like away from the basket, not on its center, sort of like 10 to 12 feet, 2-point shooter. He was the best in the league. He was fucking unreal how good he was at this. This had become his shot where he'd practiced it a million times. He'd mastered this. And his patented shot wasn't even a simple, you're open, you get it at that stage, you do go up and take a shot. It was like shimmying off the defense and doing a difficult fadeaway shot, which is one of the most difficult for a shooter to move because you have to shoot while you're moving at the opposite direction and moving like up and down and away, basically. That's one of the most difficult shots. That became his bread and butter move. So that's where he hits all those game winners. That's how he breaks people down. That's how he makes it a nightmare for the defense. And that was what made him become a god because he already had all the rest of the skill set. And he added that in, and at that point, he was unbeatable. And it was just over at that point in time. Before the early years, he was using athletic ability. He had to face a team team that you could slash against and get to the basket. So when he went against teams like the Celtics, like the Pistons, they bullied him inside, they fucked him up, and he couldn't get it. It wasn't as effective. He just wasn't. Go watch the games. Then in the period where he won the first 2 championships, this was like athletic peak, meeting some of that shooting, meeting having a better team, meeting teams that are favourable to play. Now it's a bit more open, but now he's winning a bit off athletic ability. The last period is none of the athletic ability. It's all fundamentals, skill set developed, mentality, having no weaknesses because you've turned them all into strengths, having even weak teammates be a strength because you've learned how to use them. This was a great example. I'll give you one more sports example. So another tennis one, actually. Andre Agassi. Now, anyone who knows Andre Agassi now goes, well, he's obviously one of the best of all time. He's one of the best returners, could take the ball on the rise every time. Fucking insane ability to do so. Had a really good serve as well. Really good running around the ball. Really sick player. But when you think of his 8 championships he has now, you have to realise he was something like 1 for 5 in his first 5 Grand Slam finals. He was a failure. He was a guy where he should have had so much time. He should have been the best player, and he was failing. And then by about half of his career, he only had 2 championships. And he'd been in a whole bunch of finals. And in fact, his career dipped off, and he'd had all these drug problems, and it looked like it's over for him. But instead, he reset his mind, he got the right coach, he got a strength and conditioning guy, he developed to working on his weaknesses, to working on the problems he had, to learning how to not just use talent to blow people away, but to use talent to make the game easier for yourself and to make the game more difficult for the opponent, and use it learning strategy. Whereas before he was so brilliant and had such natural abilities and natural gifts that he'd worked on since a very young age that he didn't need to, and he could just beat people with ease and with talent. Now, by maximising and making his talent more efficient, in the latter part of his career, he won 6 Grand Slams. He won something like 6 out of the last 8 finals he was in, or something ludicrous like that. Absolutely amazing, winning tons, and winning some of them past age 30. Once a tennis player gets to age 30, that's usually it. Most, even the great players, win like 1 championship. He won like 3 or 4. He won a whole bunch after age 30. Absolutely incredible career. And again, it's because of this way he accepted his failures and he learned to fix himself with the help of others. Now let's look at some esports examples. So the greatest Brood War player of all time, StarCraft Brood War, is Flash. He still plays StarCraft 2 now. But what people don't know about Flash is that in 2009, he was a failed genius. As a 15-year-old, he'd won the quickest OSL final ever. The OSL was the OSL and MSL were the 2 big championships to win, like a GSL now. He'd won one in like 15 minutes of play and smashed one of the best players at the time and won it at age 15. So you're thinking, right, well, this guy's in for a fuck ton, you know. The backs of all time anyone had ever won was 6. If he's won 1 at 15 and he's wrecking everyone now, he's going to win, you know, he's going to have like 5 by the time he's 17, isn't he? No. What happened was, by the time he was about 17 or 18, so when in 2009, he still had 1 championship. In fact, he had been in, I think, at that point in time, no more finals. I don't think he'd ever made a final after that. And so he was considered a failure. He was a brilliant player, by the way. At this exact time, he's not making finals still. He's still amazing in Pro League, in the team games, dropping 40 kills, 50 wins in a season every time. He's a beast everywhere. He's played smaller tournaments, GOM tournaments, and he's winning them and showing incredible form. He's still a great player, but something's wrong. He's not even making round of 8s of some of these tournaments. He's not making round of 4s. Meanwhile, his rival, a very, very talented player called Jaedong, was blasting past him. At this point, at late 2009, Jaedong had 5 championships. Remember, the most ever was 6, and Flash has 1. It's over for him, right? His generation, Jaedong's 1. Bisu's got 3. He's got more than him. At that point in time, Flash makes his weakness. His key weakness was he's this incredible macro player, really good at cheese as well, but he abuses the macro. He tries to do these crazy 14cc, which is the most greedy opening you can do, where you just build another command center and try to have 2 bases immediately. He kept trying to do that over and over and would routinely lose these key matches in these big tournaments to prevent him going further, to prevent him winning the series, and everyone was like, right, he's just never going to do it. Then something happened where he lost 2 championships while winning 1 against a lesser player. And the next time he came along, he'd made that weakness into such a strength that he actually used that same strategy 3 times in a row to beat Jaedong, win that final in ease, then won 2 more finals against Jaedong. By the end of his career, 2 years later, less than 2 years, about a year and a half later, he was at 6 championships. And in 2010, he made all 6 finals and won 4 of them. So he turned it around from a weakness into his main strength, and then he was unbeatable. And it was over at that point in time. You could never have seen that earlier on. I'll give you a few more examples. I'll go through these ones a bit quicker, so it's not going to be super long. So in CSGO now, we've had someone who's done this, Device. Device's problem was, talent-wise, in late 2013, we already could see when his teams would win a map off Very Games or they'd win a map off Nip, this guy's fucking unbelievably talented. He has the talent level, the skill, the variety of talent, pistols, rifles, AWPing, that he actually should be one of the top 5 players in the world. He should be taking his team to finals, taking them to championships. It wasn't until 2015 at Copenhagen Games that he made the final of an international tournament of any caliber. All the rest of his career, a year and a half or so, he just spent losing every semi-final, losing every big quarter-final along with the other semis that he didn't get through. All the time, didn't matter who it was, but it would be the same people again. He'd lose in the same way on the third map, on this side, in this scenario, when he gave up and his team gave up and he couldn't fit anything going. And he didn't fix it all overnight. He didn't become like the most dominant player, the most clutch player, and he's racked everyone out the server and all this. What he did is he's worked on those minor parts. He worked on his mentality a little bit, so it became a little bit stronger. Now he didn't choke as much. Now he's more consistent. Now he's able to use that massive skill set. So if one thing wasn't going here, he could provide something here and still contribute to his team. And now his team is one of the top 3 teams in the world. His team won 4 out of their last 6 tournaments. A guy who'd never made finals until this year has won 4 titles, which already makes him now one of the greatest CSGO players of all time. He's turned it around. He's turning it around, and it's an ongoing process still. And how beautiful to see when you saw all that failure and you thought it's only getting worse for this guy, he's never going to get over it, and he did. He got over it. An example, a very recent one, is AUI 2000, the support player, the position 4 player, most recently of Evil Geniuses, but he got kicked most recently after TI, and before that of Cloud9. When he was in Cloud9, early on, before the game became Cloud9, they had this crazy tournament, MLG Columbus, where it was one of the maddest storylines ever, where they just figured all the shit out on the fly with a stand-in, won the tournament over fucking DK, who became beasts the next year. Just amazing story. But after that, when they become Cloud9, he's a really good player. He's the most consistent player on his team. He's really well-rounded, seems to have a good approach in terms of how they work tactically. His team's always getting second place. They're always losing. They're even winning upper bracket finals. Then the same team comes and beats them from the lower bracket. And even when they have to win 2 series against them, and nothing ever works. He's always losing. He's always choking. So everyone's like, everyone's a choker on this team. Everyone's got problems. They're mentally weak, etc. So he leaves that team and he joins another team, Evil Geniuses. And they're a team where they've won a lot, but they've lost their star player, and now it's looking like, okay, they're going to have to rebuild, and there's a lot of other teams that are more talented out there. Are they going to be able to get past them? And he manages to find a way to fit his game, even though personality-wise, maybe he doesn't fit with all those people in that team and the system they want to use, and find a niche within that team. And find a niche where his specialities now don't just prop up his team, make them look good, but now actually make his team one of the best, make them have a special strength in a certain area where now they have edges over other teams, and other people's talent is facilitated to be excellent in that sense, in that scenario. And his team becomes part of one where they can figure things out. They can figure things out in a match, how to overcome a battle here, how to make the enemy play their style, how to get the right picks to set the tempo for how they want the game to be. And he's overcoming any of those issues of choking before or having the problems with not getting along with people within the team. This is all getting fixed. And they win the first big championship together, and they win the last. They win the international, the big world championship of Dota 2. And he did it. Now, there's a few examples I'll give you now of people who are currently at the beginning of that process. They've had all these problems, but they haven't overcome it yet. So one right now in CSGO is Simple. This guy, talent-wise, is fucking unbelievable. He's even a really clutch player. He's one of the most skilled players in the world. He's skilled in every area. He's got incredible confidence where he almost can't be broken. He's so clutch. He will carry a whole game himself. His problem is he has no concept of the team game. He has no concept of what arrogance is, in the sense of, like, you won't treat a teammate with respect. You won't allow him to be worse than you, but encourage him so that he's able to contribute, so that it helps you win. So that, yeah, you carried the game, but if you could have got him to help, if you used him properly, you'd win the game with ease, even with a lesser performance from you. He doesn't understand that aspect, and that is killing his career. And it's likely he'll never make the final of a big tournament with the way his career is currently going. Now, admittedly, he's 17. There's time to change that. Forgiven. This monster AD carry player in League of Legends. In terms of talent and mentality, again, it's like a Simple. Unbelievable. He's one of the few Westerners who, in the right meta, with any of his 4 or 5 champions that, if they were in the right meta, would be available. And a team based around him would be comparable to the gods of the Asian scene. He really would be. He'd be up there with those beast AD carries from Asia. Now, His problem, the team aspect again. And when he's not in his meta, then his mentality actually gives up a bit. And if he can't be the carry, he has problems being just a supportive player or playing just a lesser role like someone else can. He has these issues that he's trying to overcome. And can I trust teammates? And if they let me down, how do I deal with that myself? These are all his problems. Another guy, in a similar vein, Double Lift, AD carry of CLG. This is a guy where he's been through it all. He was the super carry and he thought he had the teammates, but they were falling off and then they didn't care about the game. Then he got newer players in and they were chokers and they were players who were passive aggressive and they didn't have the right mentality, and then they would just blame him if he tried to be the confident leader and cocky and all that stuff. And then if he didn't do that stuff and he put it on them, they couldn't lead and they fell apart. And so he's been waiting all this time, and now finally he's got to an LCS final. Now he's got some teammates who can take some initiative, who he can share some of the load with, but he can still be the star himself. Maybe of those three, he's the closest to getting there. Maybe he's going to win now. Maybe he's going to do it. We don't know yet. But his career's been tortured because it's been so long. The other ones have only had a couple of years. He's had like 4 or 5 years. He's still waiting for it. Well, probably like 3 or 4 more, 3 years realistically. And it still hasn't quite got his shit together there. An interesting thing to make a point of is, even when I'm critical of these people in my work, because that's part of my job, and I think that's part of what I think I need to do. That's something that I think is important to my work, to be honest, and to articulate where these guys are failing and where the problems are. I don't think it's good to be like, oh, get him next time, champ, you'll do well. I think you don't help a guy by doing that. You'll notice I never BM these people directly. I never go right at them and fuck with them and get in their heads. It's not something I do. In fact, what people don't know, and I'm not going to tell which players I've done this with, many players who I've seen have these issues, at an event, I'll try talking to them a little bit. I'll just try striking up a little bit of conversation, see if they're friendly, see if there's someone who's on a similar wavelength to me, maybe send them a tweet or something. And if they're open to it, if it's not something that like you'd be forcing on them, then I'll give them some words of encouragement, or I'll talk to them. A lot of them I've recommended books to, or if they're not book readers, documentaries or movies, things that some of them, they might not even understand why I'm doing it, but the underlying theme there is about this self-discovery, is about finding your weaknesses, is about understanding how to believe in yourself, how to trust in a teammate. Give them these tools where if they then take it, I'm only just offering it, I can't do anything with it. If they take it, they could then achieve something incredible themselves, and it would be all them. Now, the problem with this whole topic is to, again, you have to take it from the gaming aspect and put it in real life. And that's where you see the big problem. Because as people, a lot of us have these problems. A lot of us have these flaws. We're all flawed people. We're all broken in some sense. That's the conceit about modern society that is ridiculous. Is the notion that there's 90% normal people and 10% broken people. No, the 10% are the ones who are broken so badly that they are like mental problems where they can't even hold it together and do the basic conceits of society, like politeness and dressing themselves in hygiene and having a job and stuff. The rest of the 90%, most of those guys are being tortured to some degree, have pain, have an existential hole in themselves. This is something I've found has been an important part of developing my own life, is to accept that this exists within everyone in modern society. It's a problem we have. I mean, unfortunately, when I've made jokes along those lines, people get super butthurt because that was like a diss or whatever. But everyone has these existential holes. Everyone, from every culture. And part of the reason why is because modern life doesn't fill some of those deep needs or holes or facilitate what we need as people. That's why you get people who, they're just lost in life, or they're lost and they just say, all right, well, what are the rules to this game that I'm playing? Oh, this is what you're supposed to do. Get kids, a job, wife, dog. I've done all those things. Fuck, what next? Is that it? Is it the end of my life now? And then I just retire and I die? Like, what supposed to, that doesn't feel fulfilling, this quest. That's why, because they didn't have something to pursue, a craft. They didn't have something that they were drawn to, that they needed to do, something about themselves, which is what those vehicles are for, that they needed to develop. They wanted to look inside themselves and develop that and to explore new aspects of themselves, because work, family, social life, these things keep them too busy. These things keep them distracted, keep them ticking over. There's a lack in their life of meaningful rituals, of things that give them points in their life to stop and look at things and look at it from outside perspective and go, wow, fucking look how crazy this is. And look what I'm going to have to do here. And if I want to get to this point here, I'm going to have to make this huge leap. There's lack of things to help them get these positions. There's nowhere to go. There's a lack of paths, naturally, we think, that they're obvious to pursue. A lack of areas that encourage self-discovery. That's why the occult, the psychedelic, the art impulses within societies have always bubbled to the surface, or have always been there under the surface if you knew where to seek. That's why that whole thing of like, find the others, find the people who can help you pursue these things, who you resonate with, who have something about them where you can sense that there's something important going on there, and that's what you want in your life, or you want to be inspired by that. That's another thing. People misunderstand inspiration. They see like a musician who's brilliant and they think, oh, since I can feel how brilliant his music is, I can feel how wonderful it makes me feel, that means that to be inspired means I have to be a musician and I need to make music like him. You've missed the point completely. The point is to understand, separated from the music, what was driving that music? What did he develop out himself to be able to express it into music there? And find in yourself what would be the aspect that you're drawn to. Is it some artistic output? Is it something about society? Do you need to help certain types of people? Whatever it might be, you develop that similar thing in yourself and then you express it in a way that makes sense for you, your life, and your skill set. And that's what these players are trying to do. And that's what these players who are so talented and so good and have everything going for them, but they fuck up because they're like us. They're all flawed. They've all got these holes and they're trying to find a way, a process to get through it all. And if they do, just like people become better people and become seemingly enlightened or become wonderful people and accomplish incredible feats and overcome great challenges, so these players go from being talented but failures to being the greatest players ever to succeeding. And everyone can do that in their life if they can acknowledge this path and don't just see it as a game, see that as just someone who's expressing that human potential through a game instead of an instrument, instead of through business, instead of through some kind of artistic endeavor. Thanks to Alpha Draft for the money that allows me to make videos like this. Cheers.